It is such a blessing to have everybody here on a Saturday morning, as we're really blessed to welcome Reverend Violet Littleton and sorry.
That's D. Littleton, Violet Little.
Thank you. That's where I get it confused. That's it. Sorry, Reverend Violet Little and Ms. Beth Toler, who are going to offer us some introduction to trauma-informed ministry. I think everybody here may know, we received a $5,000 Forward Together in Faith grant from the Synod with the intent to create an opportunity for a Bible study in partnership with the Reach Out Foundation, which accompanies the Unhoused in Pendle. And I believe, when did that nonprofit begin? I'm trying to remember.
That's what we just learned. That's right. She's on her right, by the way, our director, Andrea. And about 2 weeks ago that we celebrated our 30th anniversary on March 1st. 30th. Oh my God. March 1st, and we didn't even realize we knew it was getting close to 30, but we were so yeah, 30 years. It's been
30 years.
5 years in Marsville, and 25 years right in Marsville. Are you familiar with like where Big Marty's carpet is on the corner? It's been there for many years. So it's between there and Our Lady of Grace Church, back one block, kind of on Monroe, behind the hardware store. And True Light is a real nice boutique right there. A friend of ours owns it. It's a faith-based boutique, secondhand store. And yeah, so we're right there in Pendle. Yeah, Our Lady of Grace is very gracious and kind and lets us park in their large parking lot, and so we always direct people to do that. There's some street parking, but our tiny lot in the back doesn't accommodate many cars, so we do utilize the church parking lot. But thank you for having us, and thank you for partnering with us. We've done a lot over this past year, a little over a year, to grow the program, expand the program, improve the program, and we're still every day learning from our participants, from our partners, from the community, from just things that we see on TV. We catch little things and have all these ideas. We just wish we had more time in the day to implement some of these things because the day is only so long, and we have lots of energy and ideas. It's just not enough time to get it all done. So we have to follow God's plan, be patient, right, and things every day. We make improvement. We see progress. We've seen so many wonderful miracles happen. We can't really call it anything that other than a miracle with some of the participants we've worked with that have had decades of struggle and hardship and challenges and trauma, and we've been able to reach them and we've been able to help them. One gentleman, 40 years, he was homeless in this area, lots of layers of trauma and things, and we started working that one-on-one with him a little bit to break down the barriers and to let him know we are people who care, because in the system, a lot of you probably have experienced this or know it, but they constantly hit these brick walls. They get no responses back. They call these numbers. They can't get through. And it's hard. It's hard for us and for these people, for people that have no phones anyway, or they're sleeping outside, or they hardly have any support. It's hard to keep going and have that tenacity to really get that far to make something happen, and so they give up. They just, and you can't blame them in a way, So we really try hard every day to let them know that we do care, that we're going to fight for whatever it is that we can help them with, point them in those directions, and hold other people accountable in those other agencies and those other positions, because it does take a village. We can't do this all on our own, and we realize that, unfortunately, but they, I think, have realized that we're forming a family. Most of these individuals don't have much family, if any, and so they really have come to know that we care, and they're trusting us. And we see, team building. We're doing these cleanups around town. We've done about 4 so far. Did at the Salvation Army the other day, and the Major Kim inside the building, she was just amazed. And the next day we talked, and she said it was just so wonderful to see all these people together out there with their pickers and the buckets and the leaves, and we just had a great time. It was a beautiful day, and the weather was perfect, and so things like that, little by little, it's really making a huge difference, So thank you very much.
facilitator, right? And your specialty was what again?
So, I was a certified recovery specialist about 8 years ago. I worked at Family Service. I worked with about 40 individuals that struggled with opiates. It was a Center of Excellence program that was created by the governor at that point. But my own son was struggling at that time, and so unfortunately he had fentanyl overdose, which caused a anoxic brain injury. So Chris is 32 now. It happened 7 years ago, just about. And so God took me in that direction, and I had to tend to him, and everything that went along with that. So I wasn't working all of those years for the most part. And then about a year ago, Desiree and I just were brought back at the same time to reach out on the board. We were on the board together, and just saw that things needed to be managed better and changed and things. So we both came in, and so she's the director now, and I'm a facilitator / community outreach / president of the board. Like, just whatever's needed, we just jump in. Yeah. So we're evolving as time goes on, acquiring some new staff, trying to share with our staff the values and the beliefs that we hold ourselves, because it's a difficult population to work with on a daily basis. We're there Monday through Friday right now. We hope to expand that, but we have people that struggle with mental health, people that struggle with substance use disorder or are in recovery and are homeless, or all three, So it's a very challenging population. You don't know what the day is going to bring. You don't know what's going to happen. But we do know, walking in, whatever happens, we will handle it. God will help us, and, we'll figure it out. But it's a special calling to work with this population, and everyone doesn't have the skills or belief system to be able to do that. So we really have worked hard to try to share those things with the staff, and realize if it's not something that they want to continue to do, that's okay. And I was at a conference down at Penn last week for a brain injury conference, and the last session was about trauma-informed care. And so that's what we talk about all the time, right? You have these behaviors and these things going on and these explosions. And my first thought is, why is this happening, right? What are the layers of trauma or background to this person's life that's causing this? Because there's always a root cause, and you don't see it at that minute, and it's hard to even think that way when something is immediately happening. But we really do have to keep that in mind, and honestly try to be able to work more one-on-one with our people. Right now it's hard because we're juggling all these things in a day, and so, but we have seen when you spend that little bit of time, for the most part, with most of the people, it makes the difference. That's what makes the difference. So we're hoping to be able to gain more funding, to get more staff to be able to do that one-on-one. I think, we have caseworkers that work in other agencies, but their caseloads are enormous. They don't have the time or the energy to devote enough with each person. So, that mentoring really, we've seen makes a huge difference. So, thank you.
So do you participate in for the Hope Lunches? So if you participate with the Hope Lunches, this is where your donations go. And Sarah is the one who assembles that for us each week, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, pizza comes Monday, right? Tito's Pizza right around the corner. Monday, rest of the back lunches on Tuesday, and every other Thursday is Vince's Hardly, right? And everything in between.
And so, hopefully everybody knows it or had done a little bit of research. Reach In is a drop-in center and support center. They're open 5 days a week. People can get picked up at the various sites around the Lower Bucks County area. Come to Reach Out Foundation, where they can get warm meals, they can wash their clothes, they can shower, they can stay in the system, they can participate in support groups. And the hope is that we can offer another support group via a Bible study, devotional time to offer that spiritual support. But trauma-informed ministry, thank you very much. Reverend Beth Toler is also a licensed marriage and family therapist who is educated in trauma-informed ministry and has presented on this, I know, at Kindling Faith, which is, I think, still part of United Lutheran Seminary. And that's where, well, actually, I knew Beth from before, Reverend Toler, but that's where we got the idea after Bob and Larry said, hey, this is something that I think we might be being called to by God. So I'm going to hand it over to Reverend Toler first, and then hand the microphone over to Reverend Little, who is the pastor of the Welcome Church which is an church entirely serving the Unhoused in Philadelphia, and has this very exciting Sanctuary Village project that they've been working on for a few years now, that we have also supported through our endowment fund, which you may have then heard a little bit about of it because of that. Okay, thank you.
Great. You can call me Beth. Thank you. And maybe what we'll do, Violet, if this is all right, just as a way, I'm sorry that the technology put us behind, but thank you for providing it. But maybe what we'll do is we'll introduce ourselves and also ask you all to introduce yourselves to us. And then we kind of have this is kind of a two-part presentation. So I'm going to kind of do the framework, the context of language and understanding what trauma-informed care is, but also just thinking about facts versus myths in terms of working with the unhoused population. And then we'll transition however long that takes. We'll probably have a break, and then Violet is going to kind of lead us in an experience that will help you also think about what it means to enter this ministry, and in some very creative ways. I think that's where we landed. Yes? Does that sound good? All right. So I've already been introduced. I live in Philadelphia, Mount Airy, and have had the privilege to work with a lot of Lutheran churches because I happen to have landed in the Lutheran world via my partner. So I'm grateful always to get to go to different churches and meet folks and hear about the good work that you're doing. And I'm really glad to be here today. So I'll just I guess everybody needs to speak in a microphone, right? So pass a microphone and just maybe as a way of introduction, your name and kind of why you chose to get involved in this particular ministry. We'll do it. And looks like we're going to start over there.
Hi, I'm Megan Parker, and I'm actually here with family, my husband Brian, my daughter Lyric, and we sometimes volunteer at the AHTN meals, and I'd like to just get more comfortable and not just stay in the kitchen all the time, but also I'm here because I do feel that God is calling me to not just come alongside more vulnerable people, but to actually befriend them. And to do that, I need more understanding.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ludwig, and before I got sick, I was an art educator and for 15 years, and most of those times I was working in situations where I was inner city with children, or my last one was at Bucksmont Academy, part of the International Institute of Restorative Practices, where we worked with a lot of kids that were dealing with a lot of trauma, and I felt called there to do that. But then it got hard when I had my own children, and I also then got sick, and life goes on, but I'm feeling now that God's calling me to do more again, and I need, more education, more information, more, especially with an adult population, and then same with Megan. I do these, these meals, and I'd love to go out and talk, but there's just so much that I'm like, you're just like, I can't. That's insensitive. That's not, and so you just want to know how to better relate, and to maybe even Megan and I at some point can fill in and do, because I think the Bible study's at the same time the one we're doing, but I definitely, it feels like it's a calling.
Brian Parker, I'm Megan's husband. I do help at the AHTN meals and also do some other Bible studies with small groups, and have always been just intrigued at where that might lead me. And so if I can get some skills here today of just being able to share, that would help.
Lyric Parker. I'm just here because I want to just help people in any way I can. I feel like this is where I'm being directed to right now.
I'm Sarah Wheeler. My involvement has been partly the AHTN meals, like the Parkers, and the other involvement is assembling lunches on Tuesday mornings, which Sandy referenced. My reason for being here is that I really don't know anything about the experience of homelessness or what that would look like to a person. And so basically I'm looking to see some background and get a little bit more sensitivity.
Hi, I'm Karen Orr, and I've been involved with feeding the people over on Route 13, and had some experience interacting with them during dinner. And although I didn't really have any experience with being homeless, I felt like they always were striking up conversations, and they just want to be heard. And if I could get more skills, then maybe during the ATH and meals, I'd, be able to interact a little better.
So the Lutheran Church of God's Love has been in a process of exploration about where God is calling us in ministry moving forward in the years to come. One of the things that Karen mentioned was during COVID, when all social services were shut down, we began bringing food to people who were experiencing homelessness during that time at an encampment that was on 13 at the corner of 13 and Green. And I think that lasted 2.5 years. It grew from bringing bagels that we were receiving that we could no longer consume during our cafe hour because we were shut down, to once a week to 4 o'clock, 7 days a week, providing hot meals in partnership with other ministries. Myself and the former pastor, Dan Whitener, were going down there. I think about 6 months I was down there weekly just to offer presence and personal prayer. We grew into serving with clothes. And Pastor Whitener also did a memorial service for somebody who was killed in that community, in that space. It became a really big thing, and then Homeland Security and Bristol Township shut us down. At that time, that's when we were introduced to the Reach Out Foundation, and so we pivoted and moved our support over there. And so I'm kind of curious to see in this next kind of iteration with this support from the Synod, how that might shape us as God's people and have us not just be the gathered, but the sent.
Hello everyone, I'm Wenjie. I am from China. Now I'm new here. So I got this email, and I know when I come here, I always listen some news. And there's some homeless, especially in winter, they feel not good. I think so. Now I want to know how about the real situation and how can I learn. I want to learn how to help them. Yeah. So it's my first time to come here. Yeah. Thank you everyone. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sandy Anthony. I kind of lead up all the outreach ministries here at church and was involved in feeding the homeless under the Turnpike Bridge in Bristol. Was there almost every night for 2.5 years. And that experience, like if you would have asked me previous to that, you want to go every night and hang out with the homeless? I'd have been like, no. But I really learned, I was kind of afraid before, but I really learned they're just people like any other people, right? And so I want to be able to help, learn more about it and to help other people not feel afraid of it and try to expand that ministry.
My name is Larry Whalen, here at God's Love Lutheran Church, and Bob and I, was Bob the driving force that started this idea for a program of a Bible study down there. And let's see, my previous church, I was in Central Buck, so I worked with Code Blue up there. I drove for a couple of years up there. We did Christian Endeavor. We go to the work camps down in the hollers of West Virginia. Worked a lot of Bible studies, for the last 30 years. And let's see, that's it. We're just hoping the Holy Spirit interjects here and takes hold of these people that are lost souls. Thanks for your help.
Will Toppin, I'm council president for the church, and I'm mainly here to observe and learn.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
Will Toppin.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. My name is Desiree Arney, and I am the Executive Director of Reach Out Foundation, and I'm also here to learn. We work with the homeless, Andrea and I, sometimes 7 days a week, and wow, we sit in a circle like this every day, and we get to know the people and their hearts, and it's been a life-changing job for me this past year. So I'm here to always learn how I can do better and open their hearts to God's love by preaching the gospel and, when necessary, using words.
Thank you, St. Francis.
Andrea from Reach Out. I'd like to give a little bit of introduction about what we do and the program and stuff. But just a couple things that I didn't mention before is we did have our first graduation from Reach Out Academy, which is a small pilot that we modeled from the Salt Lake City program that we visited, and we had one person had perfect attendance, 10 weeks, 3 classes a day or 4 classes a day, and so we had a little graduation last week, and 42, I think, around Paulie's about 42, never wore a cap and gown in his life, and it was just fabulous. It was just such a milestone for us as our first graduation, and of course we'll continue and build that program. But just wanted to mention a couple things about the ideas for speaking with people. Some of the things that we do, a joke of the day, like we just look up a joke of the day, or word of the day. We start doing these things, and then it just leads to more like conversation and that kind of thing. I thought about that as you mentioned that. But yeah, like you just said, they're people, right? And they like to be seen, they need to be heard, and that's priceless, just to give them that attention and time.
Nancy Smoose, I'm Bob's wife. I wanted to get involved with this to help him, okay, for one thing. He's always said, we provide a lot of food for the homeless, nurturing physical food, but we need to provide spiritual food. And so I want to help do that. I've been teaching Sunday school for many years here. I'm a retired public school teacher. Thanks. There's a lot of us. And we encounter the homeless mostly from our trips to New York and Seattle. That's where our daughters live. And you can't avoid it. And I guess I just want to learn how to interact better with them instead of stepping over them and just walking by them, or occasionally if I have change in my pocket, hand them money. I just want another way to interact with them. I want to learn that.
I'm Bob Smoose, and if you don't know it, we are being videotaped so that we can actually then share this with others that weren't able to make it today, and hopefully some other churches that might hopefully get involved. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot because we want to get rolling. So it's great to have you all here. Thank you for coming out.
I'm Violet Little, pastor and developer of the Welcome Church. We've been around for over a decade now. It's a church that started in the women's bathroom at Suburban Station, for real. You'll hear more later. I'm also a trained psychoanalytic psychotherapist, trained in working with children and adults, and I have a 2-day-a-week private practice, but you'll hear more.
Yeah, I've got this. So here's where I'm going to do, I don't know if you remember Stupid Human Tricks. So I'm going to try this, and what you need to know is if I see you tomorrow, this probably is not going to last, but I think I have, is it Megan, Sarah, Brian, Lyric, another Sarah, Karen, Pastor, and I missed your first name. Wingy. Okay, thank you. This jacked me up. Nancy, Sandy. Sandy, Desiree, Andrea, and you're Nancy, Bob, Larry, Will. And who are you? Who are you? I don't know. All right. So again, it might not last 30 minutes, but at least for now, I have your names. And please call me Beth. So again, the information I'm going to give is just really kind of hopefully just information that will help you enter a context maybe more confidently. And I can already tell you have some of the language down, which is good. That's part of the task. And also meeting people as people, right? So one of the things that I do just as a human, when I encounter someone on the street who I presume may be experiencing homelessness, I'm very intent to look them in the eye and smile. And also, if I get asked for money, I know there's varying opinions on what you're supposed to do in that situation. I usually will say if I very rarely carry cash anymore, so that's a thing. But I say, I'm really sorry, I don't have any money. And I say that, and I look them in the eye, and thank you for asking, and I'm sorry. But I don't just walk, I just don't keep it moving, right? So really treating people as humans is really the first thing and the most important thing. So if you don't remember anything that I say, right, just treat someone like they're a person, because that's who they are. So I want to start with the language. You all are already doing a really good job with this, that we try not to say homeless. We try to use what's called kind of person-centered or person-first language, right? People experience homelessness, or people without housing, or I've noticed you say the unhoused. There's probably other things to say here. But the important piece of this with the language is that we don't want to view or treat homelessness as a state as much as it is a circumstance. And just like in the world of substance use, like we try not to say, that person's an addict. Well, they're bigger than that, right? They're more complex than that. They're a brother or a sister or a parent or a child, right? So really not using language that forces that makes homelessness their identity, right? So they are people who are experiencing, right? They're bigger than their circumstance. And it's a little dehumanizing, right? So I'm not paying attention the right way. Sorry. So when you think about some of the preconceived notions that you may have about people who are experiencing homelessness, what are some of the things that maybe you've thought before or you've heard people say? Homeless people are ... or people become homeless because ... Like, what are some of the things that you hear about people who are homeless? Yes. They're mentally ill, lazy, dangerous. Anything else? They don't want your help. Anything else? They want to be there. Yes. Drug addicts. Yep. Well, those are all the common myths. So let's unpack some of these, right? Here are some. Am I right here? Yeah. Okay. Experiencing homelessness is a choice, right? They don't want to work, drug use, or mentally ill, or it's too expensive. This is one of my favorite. It's too expensive to house people who are experiencing homelessness. What do you think, Violet? Just kidding. Well, you can say later. I know what you would say. So let's tackle this one. Homelessness is a choice, right? Actually, becoming homeless is a result of many factors. According to some recent studies and surveys done by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I think this was in 2022, the top causes of homelessness in the United States are as follows: lack of affordable housing, unemployment or insufficient income, being underemployed, health issues and medical costs, discrimination. If you look at the statistics of, homelessness knows no gender, race, right? And there are people who are more vulnerable to becoming homeless, particularly those in the LGBTQ community, particularly LGBTQ youth, who may get kicked out of their house, and people, BIPOC, people of color, right, are more likely to be homeless because of discrimination. Mental illness can be a part of the mix. I'm going to unpack this a little bit in another slide. But really, it's not the mental illness as much as the inability to get treated, right? So technically, I have a mental illness. I wake up every day. Well, I guess I do it at night, but I take a pill every night, right? Lots of people have mental illness, right? I'm lucky that I have medication, right? And I can manage it and live with it, right? So it's not so much mental illness doesn't make you homeless, it's that you can't get treatment, right? Substance abuse, the same way. I'll unpack this a little bit. Statistics actually say that more people become addicted to substances during homelessness than leading them to homelessness, right? So that's a myth. We'll unpack this a little bit. Yeah.
Of those 6 there, which do you think is the most obvious cause?
These are listed in order.
Oh, they are?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, these are listed in order. Yeah. And I really want to highlight this idea of people being priced out of housing. I don't know, I'm fortunate enough I don't own the home yet, the bank still owns it. But my mortgage is of a row home, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath row home in Philadelphia. My mortgage is half the cost of some studios and 1-bedroom apartments in my neighborhood. I don't know if I could afford, if I was out on my own right now, afford housing, right? I'm lucky to own a home. Well, I don't own it, but you get it. And income and public benefits are not keeping up with the cost of living at all, and including the medical costs. So when I lived in Washington, D.C. area for a few years, I learned a lot about the government and things I didn't know, like Schoolhouse Rock. Did y'all grow up like this is how the government works? I'm like, yeah, no, it doesn't really work that way. So you've heard about the poverty line, right? Do you know what the poverty line is currently in the United States? We can start there. What do you know?
I think it was like 32,000.
Family of 4, you're right, 32,000. Individuals, 15,000. Family of 2, 21,000. Family of 3, 26. Family of 5, 38. Now, guess what? Do you know how they come up with this number? Anybody know? What it costs to feed and clothe no housing. Housing costs are not factored into the poverty line. Yeah, so imagine if you factored in housing, then all of a sudden the poverty line, if we're thinking $3,000 a month for rent, well, let's say make it $2,000. That's a 24,000. Let's add 24,000. Nobody wants to see a poverty line that's, that's almost as much as I make, right? Like in some circumstances. So it's also just really important, the politics of this, right? Housing is not a part of how we understand poverty in the United States, or at least how we calculate it.
Something out of housing. I'm not sure that we have a lack of housing.
Right.
It's really part of it, and I'm fond of regulation, but regulation is a limiting factor on housing because if you wanted to rent rooms out of your house, in the old days there were boarding houses.
Right.
And you don't hear anything about boarding houses. And so yes, that whole class of affordable housing is missing.
Right.
And if we allow
Well, yes. I mean, I think the overall takeaway, right, is it's not that we don't have housing, it's we don't have access to housing. Just like food. There should be nobody going hungry in the world, but particularly in this country. It's not because we don't have the food, right? It's about distribution and power and politics and money, right? So anyway, so just get your head around that, right? How we understand poverty, how it's calculated, doesn't even factor in housing. And if it did, it would be a much bigger thing. So let's tackle the myth about homeless people don't want to work. They do want to work, but there are intrinsic challenges involved in getting a job and keeping it, right? So believe it or not, a lot of people who are, I know I said language and I messed it up this morning, sorry. People who are experiencing homelessness are employed while they are homeless, but they're unable to afford housing. A lot of people are well educated and in a prime position to find employment, but they struggle to find opportunities to apply their trade. In San Francisco, a recent survey, 17% of the city's homeless population are currently employed. Los Angeles Times found that individuals surveyed, nearly 60% are working or actively looking for a job. So the other layer to this, Violet and I were talking about this on the way up, just to kind of put it bluntly, imagine trying to fit in finding a job when your job on a daily basis is to wake up and figure out where you're going to eat breakfast or lunch or dinner, and you've got to be in line at this particular time for this particular service, or shelter, right? Your day is geared around survival. What did you said a brilliant phrase in the car. Something about survival. Your job is to survive when you are experiencing homelessness. And so it's not just a matter of, just go find a job, right? How am I going to fit that in? And what choice am I going to make? Am I going to relinquish this so I can go to this job interview? Do I have the clothes to wear the job interview? Right? Lots of barriers, but also there are a lot of people who are working full time, right? But cannot afford housing.
We have to have a microphone. It's not being picked up. Whoever's speaking has to have a microphone.
An additional barrier to find, if you're experiencing homelessness and needing to find a job, is you have to have clean clothes, like you said, right? So where are you going to wash them at? You have to have a phone, and that phone has to be charged. Where would you do that at? You have to have transportation to get to the job. You don't have a mailing address to be able to put on your application to even be able to get the job. So it's like a vicious cycle for anybody who wants to, or able to work, wants to work, to even get the job.
Mm-hmm. We had one of our gentlemen one day in the family circle talk about just the stigma attached to someone who is experiencing homelessness, walking into a job interview with their life on their back, and immediately, they're just, checked off the list because of the stigma attached to it.
Yeah. Yep. Get to the drug use and mental illness. So people, a lot of people don't suffer or have mental illness or substance use issues. The statistics say that the rate of substance use and mental illness in the population of those experiencing homelessness are actually the same rate across the board. They're not higher or lower. If you look at the statistics of the general population versus homeless population, the rates are pretty similar. In 2018, this is interesting, 88% of people who took a survey believed that mental illness contributed to homelessness, and another 88.4% viewed drug and alcohol use as the main contributor. but only 25% of the population were actually mentally ill. And substance use, like I've noted, the National Coalition for the Homeless, they've got great resources and website. Very clearly says substance use can be the cause, but it's also can be the result. And many people don't begin to use alcohol or drugs until they are on the street in some way. It's too expensive to house homeless people. Well, housing them is actually more cost effective than supporting someone who is chronically homeless. Studies show that using a housing first philosophy results in reduced numbers of people, who are going to be homeless. It actually reduces hospital admissions and police interventions. And healthcare costs drop dramatically for people who are provided with supportive housing. We'll get to this in a little bit. I think Violet will probably highlight this, but a lot of, when you think about healthcare for people who are experiencing homelessness is the emergency room. Imagine having the emergency room be your primary care doc, right? So again, getting people in the system and supportive housing, right, where services can be accessed easily, just reduces, and it's more cost effective. Yeah.
I think it was in the information that we gathered out in Salt Lake City at the model that we visited out there, that therapeutic community, the average homeless person was $71,000 a year per person. So this was Salt Lake numbers, but just to give you like a rough idea, so a volunteer, Patty, just said almost the same thing about a week ago, and she was astonished. And I said, we just learned it ourselves, but it's kind of a common known, fact that the money involved with. And she said, well, where'd that come from? ER visits, police activity, all kinds of things that add up, and that's just an average. I mean, some of our people have well gone above and beyond that number just this winter, probably, right. With what went on this year.
Right.
Just to give you a frame, it ends up being $1.4 million per person for 20 years of homelessness, each person. So even if you times the 71,000 by 40 people that reach out every day, it's astonishing, honestly. If you paid the people $70,000 a year to work, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But the other thing is this is one of the reasons, it's very, a lot of moving parts, but one of the reasons we are so driven to have these shelter in a box at churches around Bristol and near Reach Out is because it reduces costs of giving away motel rooms that they put one person in per room, even though we sleep in a church basement with 40. Like, it's just such a waste of money. And plus, it opens up doors where the congregation can get to know the people. And it's just an amazing opportunity, especially, because of transportation, being around Bristol and around the Croydon area on Route 1, anywhere near there, we are like knocking on church doors, asking them to open for us. So it reduced costs.
Yeah.
But it really helps people feel welcome too.
Yeah.
By the church.
Absolutely.
So last year when we sat in a circle like this at Reach Out, and I actually had to send people out in the elements after being with them all day, I just could not sleep until we found something. And so what ended up happening was the pastor around the corner from us opened his church for 21 nights last year when there was no code blue. We stayed in the basement of that church. And so we learned how to do a shelter in a box. And so basically we came up with this model that it comes with everything any church needs to open their doors: 40 sleeping bags, case of water, dinner, everything, even 2 volunteers from Reach Out. And by the way, we're helping our people become self-governing. So there's that too. So the reason we were able to sleep on the basement floor is because we had built relational equity with the people. And we knew that no one was going to hurt us if they were standing in the way together. And that's really how we felt safe. And so we shelter in a box, for lack of a better way to say it, is just everything any church needs to open up their doors from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., transportation and everything. So all they need is someone on site to oversee the building while we stay there, so.
And also, it's just a small portion.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think when we ask or bring this up for discussion, they're thinking about the entire property or building, and really another church that just partnered with us, it's literally the front foyer. You open the door and they sleep right there. The bathroom is there. The ladies sleep on that little nursery side. And it's just a small portion of the building. We don't ask for much at all. We don't need much. But we just wrote a grant yesterday, submitted a grant to Amazon to come up with kits that can remain at the church.
Oh, wow.
So we don't have to transport them. Yeah, I mean, it's it's a task to kind of get that all together, which we do. But if we could set this up with churches that are willing to do that partnership with us, everything's kind of on site there, So yeah, hopefully Amazon will help us out with that.
Yeah. I think Jeff Bezos can afford it. Just saying. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were, okay. Yeah, so let's see. So getting to the violent or dangerous piece here. In actuality, people who are experiencing homelessness are more likely to be victims of a violent attack than perpetrators. Accurate data about that is hard to find because it's often not reported or underreported. But there have been some studies and reports that 49% of study participants have been the victim of a violent attack while homeless. And the rate of violence, that rate is increasing. When people commit acts of violence, they're actually often sensationalized or to a much greater extent than those who are the crimes that are committed against them. So the media does a lot of misrepresenting in terms of when violence occurs. And I'll also connect this to mental health. People have a perception that violence and mental health, mental illness go hand in hand. I'm not exactly sure if this is the correct percentage, but it is less than 10% of those who have mental illness, including mental illnesses like schizophrenia or other psychosis. Less than 10% of people are violent. So the whole notion, the idea that mental illness equals violence is just not true. So divorcing homelessness from mental illness, but even if you want to conflate them, the statistics say that violence is not a part in terms of being perpetrators, that they're more often going to be victims. Yes.
One of our individuals, I think I mentioned him earlier, that had been homeless for about 40 years, and he's housed, by the way. He moved to Quakertown a couple months ago. He's doing really well. We were a little nervous about him going out of the area because we wondered where the support would come from, because there's not a reach out in that area of the county. But he's been connecting with services and really doing very well. So we're so happy about that. However, in talking with him and learning about some of his experiences, it broke my heart the one day he talked about these kids on bikes in Levittown, in the area of 5 Points, which is like the kind of hub where the homeless congregate these days by the library and whatnot. And these kids, teenagers, would just attack not just him, but other homeless. And where would they go? He had nowhere to go. So I think I said to him, "Can you call the police?" And one of the kids had, a father or whatever that was a police officer. So basically nothing was done. And so they were just freely able to harass these poor people. And it just broke my heart.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah. I hate to say that's a great example, positively, but it is a good example of what we're talking about. So the truth is anybody can be at risk. Violet and I were talking on the way up here. I pay for my own health insurance now, and picking a plan and being like, okay, well, my total out of pocket, if I have to come out of pocket of this amount of money, maybe I'd be able to afford it and pay it off before I died. right? But there are lots of factors that I don't think we realize how close we are in our own situations, how we could find ourselves in this, position. Anybody can experience it, and it really, in this country, the affordable housing and the skyrocket of those costs are not helping. And yeah. Oh, right.
The folks in our community asked us not to even use the term affordable housing because it is not affordable, the rates that they're using. So they like to say low-income housing.
Oh, thank you. That's why she's here. So one thing it's just some facts that those experiencing homelessness in the United States have a higher mortality rate of 3 to 4 times than the general population. The average death is 51. That's just 30 years younger than the average American. Recent data indicates a sharp increase in mortality rates with rising over 30% during the pandemic, also driven by overdoses and untreated illnesses. In 22 surveyed communities, the death rate for unhoused people tripled from 814 per 100,000 in 2011 to 2,752 per 100,000 in 2020. Again, major causes of death, overdose is a leading cause, increased by 488% between 2011 and 2020. But also because healthcare and access to healthcare is so precarious, other issues like heart disease, traumatic injuries, accidents, those kinds of things also contribute. And women are 4 times more likely to die, while homeless men are 3.3 times more likely. So,
Do you have a gender breakdown for homeless?
25, 75? Yes.
That's 3 homes.
You want to say that in the microphone? Sorry.
On the street, those experiencing chronic street homelessness, the breakdown is 25% women, 75% men, and however people are defining their genders, but basically that's the breakdown.
How about children? Children homeless?
I'm not sure.
In Philadelphia, there are very few. I have never met, I did meet 2 children on the street with their family, but usually the children are with family members or in the system in foster care.
Do they consider someone sleeping in the car as being unhoused?
Yes. All right, so what does it mean to put pastoral care here, but care? What does it mean to offer trauma-informed care? So I want to introduce, well, first of all, I want to say trauma. So trauma has become quite the word these days. And there's been a lot of work in trauma studies. So normally, when we used to think about trauma, we thought about people coming back from war, right, who had really suffered significant violent kind of crisis kind of things. Today, we understand trauma much more broadly. And one of the ways that helps us do this is this called the Adverse Childhood Experiences scale or score. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a second. But I want to invite you not just to think about this in terms of the work you'll be doing with the unhoused, but also when you think about people in your congregation or people that you meet on the street every day. The way we're understanding trauma is there's very few people who have not been impacted in some way. And what I'm about to show you with this ACEs thing, what they've begun to show is the way in which trauma, particularly if you experience it as a child, leads to all kinds of things, including homelessness. Not causal, but makes you more vulnerable to become homeless for various reasons. So ACEs, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences, basically in the mid 80s or early 80s, early to mid 80s, Kaiser Permanente partnered with a couple of people from, I think, the CDC, and they did this massive study to see the correlation of what they called adverse childhood experiences, which include if you're younger than 17, at any point in your life, if you have seen or witnessed physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, parental substance abuse, mental illness, suicide or death, or crime or an incarcerated family member. So 8 things if you either experienced or witnessed as a child. What they showed is that they are linked to chronic health problems, mental illness, and substance use problems in adolescence and adulthood. About 64% of U.S. adults have experienced at least one of these before the age of 18, and nearly 17% have experienced 4 or more types of adverse child experiences. Individuals with scores of 4 or more were 12 times more likely to have attempted suicide, 7 times more likely to become an alcoholic, 10 times more likely to have injected street drugs. This study, they continue to do this study in various populations, looking at various things, but diabetes, like all kinds of heart issues, all kinds of health issues are linked directly to this adverse childhood experiences. So, if you think about this in the context of homelessness, in particular, or poverty, so children living in poverty, including those who are experiencing homelessness, are more likely to carry high ACE scores, right, which increases their risk of developmental challenges, poor health, and functioning as they move into young adulthood. They're 5 times more likely to experience more than 4 ACEs than those who live in a financially stable household or condition. And the research suggests that high ACE scores are often compounded by poverty, suggesting that children who are also low income experience worse outcomes in certain areas compared to those with high ACE scores who have higher income. So again, what that says to me is it's about access to care and supportive services, right? But the people you will come into contact with, right, more than likely have very high ACE scores. So that's just baseline, right? And again, think about people in your congregation. So it's not just a them thing. Let me start here. So SAMHSA, which is a division of the Department of Health and Human Services, has done a lot of work on what it means to offer or think about what does trauma-informed care mean. And the real big shift, the real big takeaway is like not what's wrong with you, right, but what's happened to you. So just think about that in general, not just with homeless, right? Anybody here, if you're looking at someone, something weird is happening, and how does it shift your perspective to think what's wrong with you versus what's happened to you? What does that do for you? Not rhetorical, you can share. More compassionate than judgmental. You can say it and I'll repeat it if that's easier. Go ahead. Yeah.
So one of the things that we have experienced and watched is the people growing with compassion toward each other because we are in these groups in the academy and they are sharing about their lives and understanding that, wait a minute, you lost your dad too? Or wait a minute, you were raped too? Like, it has changed everything at Reach Out Foundation that we have had these groups that are really talking about trauma. And it's really basically just like one big therapy session with each other, with peers. And so watching people change towards each other, you know, because they know. For me, it helps when I know your story and it just reminds me like this person is hurting and broken and trying to heal and they're outside.
Right.
And so I think that it raises awareness within me to have compassion, but also that to give people the opportunity to learn about each other so that they can show compassion toward each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And, go ahead.
And also, and it's, you know, up to each individual, but as staff, when we share our own personal life experiences, which we do have, they look at us a little differently and understand that we have been through a lot of the same things they've been through, even though we might not appear that way today, but we've walked in their shoes, so to speak, for a certain time, or with other things even too, you know, different challenges in our own life. So you see the walls almost immediately come down also when we are open and honest and able to share those things.
Yeah.
And peer support, that, like Desiree just mentioned, that's like our whole philosophy and model, right? Peer support, because with anything in life, if you can find and connect with people that have or will, you know, experience and take that same kind of journey, it's really therapeutic.
Yeah, and you're teeing it up greatly, right? So there are some ways in which you model your approaches based on this trauma-informed care, and one of the core things is peer, right? Peer support. Go ahead, Sarah.
When I was working in Newport News in Norfolk, Virginia, in the city schools down there, I had the opportunity to both be a high school and an elementary school teacher, but on a personal level, and especially when you become a parent, there's you watch these kids, you learn about their stories, and it's like one trauma after another, and you start really recognizing how can these kids, like how can they grow up to be adults that would function the same way, like, and you start recognizing how fortunate and the blessings you had, even if you had, like, you know, it wasn't like I had a perfect childhood, but you start recognizing how much stability starts to predict your outcome in the future, and you just start realizing at such a young age what these kids are up against. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking, and that type of, I guess for me at least, experience really opened my eyes to just how much there's just a lot of chance to just when you were born, who were you born to?
Yeah.
You know, and it's a lot of it's not, just pick yourself up from the bootstraps and
Right.
keep going. Though some kids are really resilient and they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of us, I'm like, if I had been like that, and then when I had kids and I started, and that's when I had to take a step back, but it was just like, how? It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, somebody else, sorry. Oh, good, okay. So there are some principles that go with the trauma-informed approach. Safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. And when I say that these are principles as a community entering into this, you should be carrying with you, right? And so safety is number one. How are you going to ensure physical and emotional safety? And yes, that might be about you, but it's actually more about the people you'll be working with, right? So thinking about how you set up common areas, right? That they're welcoming, that there's, I think particularly for this population, the idea of privacy, right, is not a lot of privacy in that world. So having your own space, feeling like you can have your own space. I'll unpack the space thing a little bit more later, but choice, right? This is huge. Presenting choices. People who are experiencing homelessness don't have a lot of choice. And this is something we were actually, Violet and I were talking about driving here, right? And she'll say more in her part, right? Instead of just saying, like, here's your sandwich, like, would you like a sandwich or, a salad? I don't know, just made that up, right? They very often don't have choices, right? They just are forced a lot to take what's given. So any way, shape, or form you can provide choice, even in the smallest ways, tea or coffee, water, or y'all say soda up here, water or soda, right? Those little things empowers and gives a person a sense of choice and control. And, gives them a clear and appropriate message about their rights. Collaboration, making decisions with the individual and sharing power rather than deciding for, is really big. Trustworthiness, what you say you're going to do, and be really clear in your communication about what you're doing and why you're doing, so that there's a sense of transparency and that people know there are boundaries. Again, the word boundary can be interesting. Your church is a church without walls, but you have boundaries. You have a container, right? So even if there's no physical boundary, there are ways to create and set boundaries. Boundaries help people feel safe. And respecting those, again, in a world where there's not a lot of respect for boundaries, this is really important. Violet?
About the shared power. We started a shelter for women called The Well, and the way it started was we gathered the women weekly for at least 6 weeks, and we asked the women what the shelter should be like and what the norms should be, what should be the principles of the shelter. The shelter was open, and we had the highest rate of women going from shelter into permanent housing in the city of Philadelphia. So when the mayor's office came to us and said, what was your secret? And I said, well, it's no secret. We just asked the women what they wanted, and that's why it worked. That's really...
And all of this is, and all of these things in some ways is all about empowerment, right? But again, wanting to empower individuals and let them claim the power that they actually have is important. I'm going to unpack this a little bit, and then I'm almost done. So we'll take a break, and then you get to do the fun stuff with Violet. Already did that one? Right. So safety, right? You need to feel physically and psychologically safe, right? Thinking about exits, right? You never want to block an exit. That's standard operating procedure for anybody, but particularly like when you think about these shelter in a box, like where are the exits? Do people feel like they can leave if they want to and need to? Don't want to block exits, just as an example. Again, the trustworthiness and the transparency, right? The decisions you make should be collaborative. But your structures, your rules, your whatever you want to say, being very super transparent, outline, because again, that creates a sense of a container and safety. People know what to expect, right? And there's not going to be any guesses or surprises. The peer support, I know, Andrea, you raised that, and Violet, and this idea of collaboration and community. You really want to create those spaces for peer support. And dare I say, in this context, you are also part of a peer. You are a peer, right? You're not a service provider. You are a peer. So not thinking of yourself going in as a service provider, but creating a level of support, mutuality, where all are part of the same community. You're like a church community, right? You're all peers in this setting. You should also be peers in the setting, whatever, you're going out for this, right?
Well, there's 2 days here.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
We host every month that has a 5th Saturday. Sorry, we partner with AHTN, and every month that has a 5th Saturday, we host a meal here on site.
Gotcha.
So a lot of folks are more familiar with that
Okay.
than the emerging ministry, where we're actually going to be out in the Reach Out Foundation site in that context, right? So we're utilizing this in a couple of different ways now, and I may be hoping that some of our AHTN volunteers might be interested in participating in the Reach Out Foundation devotion.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Advocates for the homeless and those in need. AHTN. And they also are the ones who coordinate Code Blue.
So again, this idea of collaboration and mutuality, right? Trauma often involves power differentials, right? And so it's important to level those out between community members. So again, coming to collective decision making, right? Also checking in, right? Is this okay? Is it not okay, right? But coming to those things in a collaborative way is really, again, important for a population that doesn't experience a lot of choice and power, right? Really creating spaces where they can own that and be a part of a community is important. Again, wanting to look at, there's, in the psychological world, there's in the world of positive psychology, there's a strengths-based versus problem-based model, right? And so we want to come from a strengths-based model. Look at these human beings as resilient human beings, right? And again, not what's wrong with you, right? But what's right with you. In the mental health field, in the counseling field, this idea of really being pushed of, well, yeah, obviously you're here to talk about your problems. Nobody has showed up to my office and wanted to pay me to tell me how awesome their life is. I would welcome that, but that's not how it works, right? So yes, we talk about their problems, right? But I also spend a lot of time helping people think about their strengths and their resilience and the things that have helped them cope and brought them to the place where they are, right? So if we're adding to this, not what's wrong with you, right? Another layer of that is what's right with you, because you have a gift, right? And you have strengths, and you're going to see a lot of that in Violet's. And just also being really sensitive to, I said, one of the primary reasons people experience homelessness is because of discrimination. And so knowing the cultural, historical issues around gender, sexuality, racism, and how that factors in is really important, right? And getting to know the cultures of the people you're working with and being sensitive to that. So that's kind of the bullet points of what it means to offer trauma-informed care, right? Any questions? I could go back or unpack anything in terms of what this means, trauma-informed care. Not what's wrong with you, but what's right with you, and what's happened to you. Yeah.
So that's kind of what Desiree has a great gift for in finding in our people what their gifts and talents are, what their strengths are, what they like to do, what they love to do, what they used to do for a career, right? And so there was one gentleman, she likes to tell about George. He came in, he was really angry all the time, fighting with everybody, just, just a bear. And so she called him in and just talked to him and found out about his background, right? What he did in life, and found out he had 3 restaurants, right, in New Jersey. And here he is, he's homeless. And actually, I think it was due to gambling, which is another huge it's a public health crisis. I saw it on TV yesterday, like the new public health crisis from even kids and teenagers all the way up, because it's so prevalent, it's so accessible, and it's just awful. So I think that was what caused him to become homeless. But anyway, he said, and she said, oh, well, you're a cook. You like to cook. We have people all day here that need to eat. You want to cook? And he said, okay. And then he just totally flipped his whole life around, and he was whistling and cooking and being nice and cooking up a storm, and he got housed eventually, so we don't see him really much anymore. But that's just one example. We have somebody else who's like our maintenance guy now, and somebody else who mom and daughter were doing sewing, got them a sewing machine, and they were doing sewing. And one guy, we call him Mr. Clean, cleans everything. I'm going to take him to my house, and so it's just figuring out what they like to do or what they had done, and trying to make that something that we can incorporate and reach out and beyond,
I think as a way, I'll kind of wrap up, and then I think we can take a break, and you can get your stuff set up, and because I know we started a little late, so I want to be sensitive to time. But when I was a young whippersnapper living in D.C., fresh out of seminary, and I was the youth person, and once a month we did service things, and intentionally with various homeless networks across the area. But one thing it was always important to do that we did, which was, we would go and bring food, but we also brought games and we brought crafts, right? And I had kids who have an experience now, and they were probably maybe in their, I don't want to think about that, but they probably are in their 30s or 40s now. I don't know. Anyway, right? They have an experience of sitting and playing a game, right? And so what that does to me is two things, right? Games aren't a part of life on the street. So somebody being able just to sit and play Uno or Monopoly or whatever, or do a craft, that's something special and unique for them, but also for you, if you were in that position, right? You're playing a game, right? You're hanging out, doing something human with human people. And so if as you think about structuring your time, make it joyful. And it's not like we're doing this for you. Like we want to know you and see and be with you as we would any other human being. So that's my parting word. I get the anxiety and the fear and this feels so different, but they're just like us, right? We're walking around doing the best we can. And by the grace of God, we have shelter. Yeah. So we'll take. Oh, go ahead.
Along that line, there was a friend of ours. She's a therapist in the area. She's going to be hopefully on our board soon. But she sent me a little blurb yesterday about a young woman here in Newtown. She's in school, University of Pittsburgh, I think. And she worked on this project that she took to Harrisburg and presented in Harrisburg to whoever would listen, I guess, that the benefits of activities and exercise and all those types of things within the homeless population, within the shelters and that kind of thing. And that's what we've been doing with the cleanups and that. It's just, it's really priceless.
Yeah.
So I just want to share this. We have a little lady, Miss Diana. She's probably 70. She has shown up every week since I've been there. I've been there a little over a year, right? We've been there. And she has such a rapport. She's probably 90 pounds, but she has such a rapport, and the population has such respect for her that when she opened her doors, she appealed to her gathering house, right? Quaker in Bristol, and they opened their doors. She really felt like, I don't need any reach out staff. I don't need any. That's how safe she felt with them because she knows them. What I say is just show up. Be the person, because whoever shows up gains the influence, right? And she can speak into their lives like no one because she has been there. Yeah. And so I just encourage you just to get to know, like you said, we always tell them, we're not doing this for you. We're doing this with you, with you.
Yeah.
And they know it. And so just come and be a friend.
Yeah. And also, really, I'd invite you maybe as a parting reflection, right? I know the word home, right, is used in this community, homelessness, whatever, right? Home, people on the street make a home, right? So they have a home and space, like what street, where you are on the street, where, that's your home. And so I would also just invite you there is a sense of home. So it's not about, I don't have a home. Home is where you are and what you make. And so I think it's really important as you enter in these spaces, they do have homes. They are not sheltered, but they have homes.
Which is why we say,
yes.
To say unhoused.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So just bearing in mind, right? All right.
And I will use this. One of the things that we do in the Welcome Church, and again, it's a church without walls, which in one sense means we don't have a building, and in another sense is we try to break down the walls that separate us from one another. So often our activities will have folks who are housed and those who are unhoused. But the majority of my congregation is made up of unhoused folks, and these are folks who are called chronic street homelessness, defined as chronic street homelessness, which means you have had to have been on the street for a year to 18 months, and it's a whole other category. So that's different from situational homelessness, which sometimes we'll see, you know, somebody has a fire, they lose their house, or, you know, they suddenly lost their house and they're, you know, they're moved in with a relative, they're still considered unhoused. But the folks who are part of the Welcome Church are folks who are actually living on the street, and some have been on the street for 15 or 20 years. So it's a transient population in that we get lots of new folks, but we also have a core group that have been there. Some have been there the entire time that I have been there as pastor. We have a weekly Bible study that I love. It is one of my sources of spiritual nurture and personal growth. And the Bible study started out by being led by myself, and we have a co-pastor who's a Presbyterian minister, Sean Steinigal. But then we really opened it up. So now we have about 8 people from within the group leading the study. And it's very powerful to have that shared leadership, because the folks with lived experience are seeing the Bible in ways that I might not see it. So we start out each week because people are coming in from all over the place. We get about 40 people at a Bible study. And that's, you know, that's a pretty good sized group to try to do Bible study. They come in from all over the place, and they're chatty, greeting one another, happy to see us, we're happy to see them. We have tables set up in the round with all kinds of things. People give us, it could be socks, it could be hand warmers, whatever. So the first couple of minutes, people come in, and it's a very kind of, it's almost like shopping at Filene's Basement or something. People are going from table to table. They take what they need, and then we have another table set up, and one of our guys does coffee, tea, hot chocolate, which we will be using some of the supplies that you gathered. That's all set up, so people get their coffee. There's another table that has snacks. The table with the snacks is filled by all the people who come in. So we put some stuff, but people take things out of their backpacks, whatever they have, and they put it on the table to share. So it's like when you're in kindergarten and they have the share table, and it overflows with everything from Spam. We actually had a can of Spam on the table, to one of the guys who used to own 2 porn shops. He makes fudge every week for us. So, I mean, people come in with their gifts, as we were talking about before. But the way that we start Bible study is we light a candle. And that's so we can get focused and centered. So, yeah, thank you. Aren't they cool? What, UVC? Yeah. Yeah. Look at you. Experience satellite. And people take turns lighting the candle. Yep, it'll go off by itself. Yep, thank you. Yeah. And we ask the same question every week. And the question is, where did you see the light of God this week? And where have you been the light of God? So I'm going to ask you that. Where did you see the light of God this past week? And where have you been the light of God for someone else? Yes?
I saw the flowers popping up in my garden that was so brown.
Beautiful. Yeah, flowers. Anyone else? Where have you seen or been?
So earlier this week, I came through the Philadelphia airport, and when I was flying out, the TSA agents were laughing and joking, and I really saw the light of God in them in the very difficult situation that they were in. And I had time to be with my parents and care for them and help them with some of the things they need assistance with, and passed it on.
So you were seeing and being the light of God. Anybody else? Where'd you see it or be it?
Yeah, I have one younger sister. Tough route. She's had a tough life, and she finally asked for help yesterday. That's a good thing.
That's wonderful. Anybody else? See or be?
I saw the light of God in my children this week when my younger child she's 6, is going through a phase where she's saying no one loves her and everyone hates her. And the older one gave her a hug and said, Jesus loves you very much. And that was just like, oh. And then I have a friend who's newly Christian but going through a lot of stuff. And she comes to me and asks me lots of questions. And it's nice to be able to talk her through some things and get her out of YouTube rabbit holes with, sound Christian doctrine and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of like being a light to someone.
Help me remember. So my son works for us, and he came in the other day with a birthday present for me, and I opened it, and it was a necklace that was a moon and a star. And so when we were homeless, we would go and chase we didn't have any money. We would go and, we had a car though, we'd go and chase the moon. So we went to different playgrounds. And so it'd be like star and moon, like that was just always our thing. He's always gotten me a necklace, a star and a moon together. And so, but what I found out yesterday was that that came out of a gumball machine. Random. And I just really saw like God showing, because he has his struggles too, Patrick. And, so it was just like God showing me like, I got this, your prayers are being heard and, and then I get the opportunity every single day to show God's love to people and at Reach Out. But particularly my husband, who has his own health conditions, is caring for his best friend who has brain cancer and is actively dying, and it's just hard to watch. But getting to just help him help his friend is for me being God's light. Yeah.
So last night, my parish in Pendle hosted their fish fry for Lent. So Reach Out had a table. They are a wonderful support of Reach Out. So we went and had a table, and I noticed this young man was there, and so I started to ask if anybody knew who he was, because I've watched him for about a year walk up and down like the main street in Pendle where I live and where Reach Out is, and you could just tell that there was something different about this young man. And he walked past Reach Out about a week ago, and I just said, hi, good morning, and he said hello, and he kept walking. So it turns out that the Knights of Columbus, which is like a men's group at the church who was hosting, they said, oh, one of the Knights knows him. You probably could talk to that gentleman. Do you know Bob? I said, yeah, Bagel Bob brings us bagels. I will talk to Bob. So I did talk with him, and he said his name is Eric. He lives right up the street in the apartments, and, I do try to help him with food and different things. He said, but I don't think he has, like, family, or I always think about Reach Out for him. So I said, can you maybe introduce us or bring him or whatever you think is best, because you know him and have a rapport with him. So he said, yeah, let's go talk to him. So we went and he introduced, and we talked for a little bit, and I just tried to explain what we could offer, and got to know a little bit about him. He was very, honest, and but his self-awareness amazed me, that he explained his struggles and his shortcomings, and how he really has to set boundaries to protect others, because he recognizes that he can be very, not violent, but just loud, or uses foul language or that kind of thing. But it was nice to finally find out a little bit about him, and maybe we can help him. We're not really sure, but it was nice to see, God's light there. I see the light of God all around the altar. All the blankets that our knit and crochet group works on diligently all year long. And at our knit and crochet meeting yesterday, I shared a little bit of a story that's in the book that you co-wrote, the one from the margins, the good news from the margin. It was a comment that Reuben had made, one of his comments, about how when you reach the end of your rope, reach for the hem of Jesus, his garment. So I reiterated that, telling him, about the story of the bleeding woman and how she, just wanted to touch his garment and she would be healed, and she believed that and she was healed. And I said to Cindy, I said, we make prayer squares. And I said, our prayer squares are the hem of Jesus. And, we should take that idea. And the comment in your book was that churches should have hems hanging so people can touch them and feel his presence. And I said we should do something like that with our prayer squares.
Anyone else? See or be the light of God. We have, as I said, we have about 40 people who are used to giving testimonies. So it takes a while for us, but it really creates the sacred space. Is there anyone who wanted to say something who didn't get to say it? In the very beginning, when we started doing this, people would respond quickly to where they saw the light of God. But it took a long time to get people to recognize where they were the light of God for someone else. So gradually, people in the group would point out, well, he brought in those clothes the other day, or when I was lost, that one came to me and told me where I could get food. And it took a very long time, but people eventually started claiming how they were the light of God to one another. And, we always emphasize, because people say, well, I don't want to brag about myself. You're not. We say it's the light of God. It's God's light, right? This is just ways it shines through us. So we start with that. But even before that, I want to see if I can find a definition here for you. We try to create the space. And I told you that we have all kinds of things around and we have a table with food. And it's really important that you don't provide everything, but that the table is open for people to put something on it if they have it. If you don't leave that space, and I'll tell you what happened, how I learned that, because I'm still learning. When we first started meeting, we met in a little narthex, and we crowded in a narthex of a church. And I just started, all I wanted to do was serve tea. I had no idea of starting a church. I was like, just let me make a pot of tea and we can drink tea together. And then I started bringing little, cookies, a few chocolate chip cookies became our trademark, which is the name of these books that I'll tell you about in a minute. But one day I forgot the cookies. I had the tea, and I was horrified. I said, oh my God, I'm sorry, we have nothing to go with the tea. And that's when people started taking things out of their backpacks and putting it on the table. And the table was filled like I never saw it filled before. And so the lesson I learned from that is if we really believe everybody has a gift to share, we have to make space for the gift. It has to be received. So now we always have tables that we don't provide everything. And we invite people, and more people catch on, and it becomes a space that is created together. That it's not just, the preposition's really important. That's one of our principles, that we're in ministry with, not to or for. That's crucial for us. So one of the things I would love to see you start with and again, we're talking about environment. I want to try to find a definition for you. Is we create what's called a holding environment. Is anyone familiar with that term, holding environment? It's a term, yes, you are, from Winnicott. But it's a space that you create literally where you can feel held and safe. And so we learned gradually what this would look like. It's a space of safety. It's a space where you can be honest. I just love that image of being held, because there's so many images of God holding us. And one of the things we learned was that people really don't want to just, there were a lot of people who couldn't sit, who would be very shy, or, there are a lot of people who wouldn't say anything because there's a microphone involved here. I wish we had a mic. We don't have a mic. And so what we did was we also set up art activities at the same time. We have a table that has markers and paper and things you can color. It also has glue and odds and ends, and we are fortunate because we have an art therapist working with us who volunteers her time, 10 hours a week with us. And so she creates a lot of projects, but we just put this stuff out to let people know that it's okay. If you want to go grab something, if you want to knit while we're doing Bible study, if whatever you need to do, if you need to move around, the way Beth talked about, know where the exits are. Well, for a lot of people, and in general, our anxiety response in everyone gets triggered when there's not enough space, or when you're feeling cornered, no way out. And for a lot of the folks in our community, especially for folks who've been incarcerated, but others too, they need to know that they can walk around if they need to. You need to get up and go to the bathroom, go ahead. You need to go outside and have a smoke, go ahead. You can come back in, or you need to just move. And so we provide things that, we've even had some of those, they call fidgets, the things that you can pop and think. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of them at Synod Assembly last year. We put those out. So you're creating the space maybe a little differently than when you have Bible study at the church, but not that different. So the first thing I would really love, and that we did, I started a network with Ruben Duran. We co-authored a book together not too long ago. And this network are people mostly from the ELCA, but there are others in it, who are, it's called the Homeless and Justice Network. And when we started, the first thing we did, or maybe a little while into it, was we had to know what our principles were. So I think if you can just think about this for a minute, and I'm going to name for you the principles that we go by, because every group will have their own principles. So before you go in to do work somewhere else, know who you are. I mean, I know you've done a lot to learn about Reach Out, but just take a few minutes to know who you are. And so these are our principles. Community is vital to all we do. Jesus stood on the margins so that all could be included, and so do we. God loves all people, no matter what. And I'll tell you, when somebody dies on the street, and we are doing the funeral, it's often in the spot where the person lived or hung out or slept. And the text we use is the Romans text, what can separate us from the love of God? And the circle goes around and names all the things that they think can separate us from God's love. They'll say, using crack, and the group will say nothing. Or they'll say, I killed somebody, and the group will say nothing. And, so that's really important, that message of God loving people and grace, no matter what. Another principle is we respect the dignity and value of all people without condition. And this is probably one of our most crucial ones. We minister with, not to or for one another. You'll see in that other series of books we did, that little project, was that we talk about making the shift from feeding people to sharing food. You know, I know a lot of times people will use that phrase, we like to feed, or we want to go feed. And it just sounds so zoo-like kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it. And so we started a program called Pay It Forward Philly. And the line is making the shift from feeding people to sharing food. Pay It Forward Philly, I just want to say, we try to find ways that people can get food with dignity and not have to feel like they have to beg for it. And so we partnered now with 4 vendors in Philadelphia where someone can go in and pay extra or pay for a meal for another person, and a little heart-shaped sticky note goes up on the wall in their store. And so if someone is hungry and comes in, all they have to do is take one of those sticky notes, hand it in, and they will get a lunch or a breakfast or whatever that particular vendor, whatever arrangement they have with us. And they can also stay there and eat it with dignity. There's no, I'm hungry, do you have food? So that's an important part. A church is the people, not the building. This building's beautiful. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, you have more than one bathroom, I'm like so impressed, it's gorgeous. But the definition of church, of course, is the people. It's not the building. Everyone has something to offer, and we need every person if we are to be whole. So again, it's what Beth was talking about, and what all of you were talking about. It's seeing the gifts. When someone is new, we have one question for them when we're meeting them. And the question is, what do you love? And a lot of times people look at us like we're like out of our mind, and they'll go, what? What do you mean? And they'll say, oh, well, I like watching movies. And we'll say again, what do you love? And that opens up a whole other world. Some people have never been asked that, and they're stunned by the question. Maybe you've never been asked that. It's not who do you love, it's what do you love. And I'll give you an example. One gentleman came in, and he was actually celebrating his 40th birthday with us. He came in right from the street, and we happened to be doing our monthly birthday celebration. And so I sat with Dave, and I said, well, Dave, what do you love? And at first he couldn't answer it. But then he said, I love nursing. And I said, oh, are you a nurse? And he said, no. I said, have you ever worked in a hospital? Or, he said, no. I said, well, tell me more about you love nursing. And he talked about this dream he had of becoming a nurse. Eventually, we helped him start with community college, go on, get what he needed to be a nurse, and he's now a nurse. He's in Ohio, where his family is. He's reconnected with his family. But it all started from that question of what do you love? And some people are never asked that question or can never think of an answer. And that's one-on-one time too. Our last principle is we see lives transformed and we are transformed ourselves. And I think this clearly came through from what you were saying, is that it's never one way. When you go to have Bible study together, something's going to happen. I don't know what it will be, and that's part of the delight I have in doing this kind of work, is I don't know what my day is going to be like. I was sharing with Beth that on Tuesdays, we just go and hang out at 30th Street Station outside. We buy a couple of boxes of Joe, and we just offer coffee to anyone who comes by. And more and more of our folks started taking on the role of hosting it. So the other day, one of our guys was there and he had a copy of the Metro, which is the free newspaper. And on the back, you know how they look for studies? They're doing a study on people who have had memory loss for 6 months, and you can get up to $29,000. He was sharing that, and he was coaching about 5 or 6 of our guys on how to prove that you have memory loss. So this guy has signed up for it, and he said, you know, they come and pick you up, and even if you're not eligible, you'll get a $25 gift card. So you don't know it's going to, I mean, you know, it's entrepreneurial. At one time when he was absolutely on the street, this guy had lived on the street for 11 years. He has a place inside. He had done a study on schizophrenia and got $500. The man does not have schizophrenia. I can tell you that as a professional. He does not have schizophrenia, but he went to the library, researched it, and was able to participate. Now, I'm not advocating this. I want to be clear. But I do want to say the level of creativity and going and researching and sharing resources with other people, those are all amazing qualities. You know, it's the art of survival. And he said, well, I'm not hurting anybody. And I said, well, can we believe the statistics that you give to us now? So I don't know. Or that anybody gives. So I just want to take a minute and say, what would some of the principles of God's love be? The church, not, yeah, you know, your congregation, right? Yes, sorry.
All are welcome, period.
That's a good one. What else?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness, that's great. That's grounded in our theology, yeah. What else? I don't know if you all know your mission statement or any of that, but there might be something in that. You're going into this place as a group, and you know there's some things that you believe. And Pastor, yes, what were you?
Well, I was going to say, we've been doing a lot of work on mission work, right? So anybody on council at least knows some of it, right? What do we got?
Make Christ known.
Make Christ known.
There's a way for everyone to contribute here.
Again, that idea of everyone has a gift.
We serve our community.
Serving the community so that you're not just in this group, but you're a wider group, part of a wider group. What else?
Come as you are.
Come as you are.
I think grace, I just feel like we can give what we know God has given us. You know, the reality of grace is how we can be gracious. I know how long God waited for me. So.
Grace, a beautiful core principle.
I'm sorry, I'm talking for a second time, but I know our church name is always, you know, God's love. So I always think of it as God loves you, period, also.
To me, that's the only thing in our mission statement is to proclaim the love of a gracious, gracious and loving God, to proclaim a gracious and loving God. That's the Welcome Church's mission statement. But anyone else? This is know who you are going into the group. And everybody's different. It's why we encourage people not to say the homeless, because it's not what is that called? Compound now? Whatever. Where not everybody is alike. It is each person is so different, as each of you are here, but there are some principles There's a reason why you come here. You know, my dear friend Janet Peterman was an interim here one time. I don't know if any of you were here when Janet was here, but she introduced me to Cindy and some of the other women because we also have a knitting group at the Welcome Church where we knit on the street. And the more I got to know the folks from here, I saw that you live up to your name, the Church of God's Love. And to me, your name says a lot. So when you're going in to do something, you know, first know who you are before you try to get to know anybody else. And then the other thing is, well, this was touched on in some of the principles, was what are the norms going to be? And by that I mean, you know, no violence. Maybe you don't have to say that. We say it. We have to say it. I've broken up a couple of fights on the street. But in that space, when we are together, no violence. And not only physical violence, no violence by mouth. And so that's one of our norms. One person at a time speaks. You think you don't have to say that, right? Well, you do. We do. Because not everyone has grown up with group experiences like that. So we say it. If somebody's speaking, let them talk. And in the beginning, it was unbelievable. I think this thing went off. It's off. Battery died. Switch out. In the beginning, we would be having a discussion and people might not know the very basic thing of, please don't have another discussion in the corner. We're in a very small space where the acoustics are terrible. We don't have a microphone. We get some spaces, borrowed spaces to meet for certain things. Like we have 2 women's groups. We have a lot of things going on. And it gets learned. It gets learned, and not for everyone. So the other thing is, I don't know what some of your norms might be. What are you going in with? What expectations or norms of the group? Is there anything in particular that you want to make sure gets set up from the beginning?
I think we would base it off of what Reach Out Center's norms are. I'm sure you've established that.
I would say expect an audience of 1, right? Like, I don't care if 1 person shows up. God has called them to the room. Yes. Like, that's just how. And also audience of 1, it's like, whenever I speak, because I do a lot of speaking, it's like, this is about him. This is all about him. He is my audience, basically. But at Reach Out, that's what I would say, because we have had 1 person show up at, a group, and the instructor, the facilitator is as if it's a room full of people.
So I think also what Violet is getting at, there's a way in which you need to think about who and the values and who you are showing up. But there's a practical of the actual group time, which is, the norms. And if you Googled, and I think you're going to leave a copy or give a copy of this, it's like a group, the actual group norms of, no cross-talking or those kind of things, right? So when we talk about, you talked about the container, or you had a better word, a Winnicott word, holding environment, right? That's a piece of, even in that Bible study, creating a structure in a container creates safety, right? And expectations of behaviors. Yeah.
Holding, but not grasping or clutching.
I'm not sure which one, Desiree or Andrea, that brought it up before, but the overriding problem when we get down there is the shame these homeless people have. And I think, most of us here, we're not living with this every day, and they are. So somehow to face that with the confidence of God is on your side, I mean, that is something we have to bring to the party.
And at the same time, be open to what is brought to you, because you will have so much brought to you in these Bible studies.
When I worked at Bucksmont Academy, and we did a lot with restorative circles and practices, and we did group norming in the beginning of the year and throughout the year if we had to, if needs changed. But the children that we worked with were always involved in the norming process. So we might have some ideas in our head of what we would want, but we would always start with a paper board on the wall, and people would just say, like, how do you want? Like, what are some norms you want in this Bible study? And we'd always, when possible, try not to frame it in a negative way, which sometimes is really hard, and you kind of get creative with your wording. But we'd also vote on it at the end, so everyone would be like, because in case something kind of got thrown out there that was a little.
Well, that's really important, because it's like what we did with the women when we formed the women's shelter. Is just how do you think this should look? And they said some things that we never were thinking in the beginning, and to honor it.
Yes. And then at the end, you would just vote on it, and or have discussion on it first and then vote on it, and that way kind of everyone, like you said, owned it, felt a part of it, and felt a part of the process.
Yeah, and the tricky thing is you want to honor what everyone is saying and what everyone is bringing, but you also have to maintain the boundaries for that sense of safety. So, for example, if there's any, we're a very open congregation in terms of many, many things, but occasionally you have someone come in and say something that's racist or heterosexist or homophobic, and we address that as a group. We have to address it. While we want to welcome what anyone brings, that's also part of it. We have to provide for the safety of everyone, and also because it's part of our theology. Your congregation has a theology. I mean, that theology of grace, that says it all, right? But so that's the tricky thing, which brings me to the other point. Are you going as a group? So there will be more than one person, right? Okay, yeah? 2, okay, at least there's 2, because in our situation, now you have a whole staff there, we're the staff and everything, but in our situation, and again, I want to be clear, the Welcome Church is a congregation. It's a church. We're not a social service agency. We're not an outreach project. We are a church. But we always do things with more than one person. It's a safety issue, but it's also if a situation needs to be diffused or someone needs extra care. Because sometimes something will be said that will trigger something in somebody else that they're struggling with. And so we now have a group of our Welcome Church leaders. As I said, we have around 8 people. And the next part, because you're going to have your group, right? How are you going to take care of your leaders? We meet quarterly for lunch, and we talk about what worked, what didn't work. Did anything come up? Are you concerned about anyone? We read books together. It's like a separate little book club, right? And there's so many good books out there. There is a book that's called Reading the Bible with the Damned. I was attracted to the title, I must admit, that I don't think anybody's damned, but it's basically seeing the Bible through eyes of people who have experienced some of those different ACEs traumas, and so there's stuff out there, but we also read fun books. And the idea is to build community and support your leaders who are doing it. Have that check-in. And for a lot of our leaders, they never thought they could lead Bible study. We had one guy who came to us after 25 years of incarceration for having murdered someone. And, you know, when I saw how he was participating, and I said, "Do you ever think about leading a Bible study?" And he said, "I can't do that." And I said, "Yeah, you could. That's the whole point. You could." And so it's working with people to build confidence and to build the interaction. Our group is a little different because, you know, we're with them a lot more hours, and so we get to know them and see them. But don't go alone. That's just for support. You know, I'm not saying anything bad's good. Nothing bad has ever happened to me.
And also, I believe that we're always going to have someone from the foundation there with us also. At least one, maybe two people attending every second of the Bible study.
There is a Roman Catholic priest named Greg Boyle. Do any of you know him? Greg? He started a program in California called Homeboy Industries, and it's the largest gang intervention program in the country. I went out to visit with him, and he's incredible. I mean, they have this whole Homeboy Industries. You could have a bakery. You can order foods from them. They sell candles. They do a lot, and he's amazing. But he's written maybe 4 or 5 books. I've read them all. They're wonderful. If you want a book, they're not how-to books. They're chock filled with stories. And, you know, the very first, so the Welcome Church partners with them now. They're part of our network. The very first story was Greg was with this guy, and one of the things they do is tattoo removal. Because when you're in the gangs, a lot of times you have certain tattoos. And the guy came to Greg and said, "You know, Father Greg, I can't get a job. I'm going to all these places." And, you know, Greg looked at him, and I guess I won't curse with this group. I could curse in my church. But anyway, but he had the words F you written across his forehead. So imagine go to a job interview and it says, "Fuck you." Come on. I mean, so Greg said, well, that could have something to do with it. So that was the first tattoo removal. That started, it's not even about what he was wearing, but that was the first thing that then started, we got to do this. Or, you know how it is, you start something and based on the needs that you see, it's going to grow and evolve. And that's what's going to happen with their Bible study, I can tell you that. We pray for one another. Those leading Bible study, we always pray for one another. Because we're putting ourselves out there, you know. And I'll give you some examples of Bible study. But be creative. It does not have to be the traditional, you know, you read a text and you say a little bit about it. And it's always good, by the way, to have open-ended questions. You're not trying to humiliate anyone to say, you know, what did it say in John, blah, blah, blah. You're not trying to do that. It's not about intimidation. It's about valuing people's ideas. And you're going to be with a group who are not all Lutheran, not all Catholic, not all believing in God. A group where church has not been kind to them. You know, we had a new guy come to us last week. He's gay. He wears, he had, you know, nails. I mean, he was all done up and he was beaten up. He came to us with cut over his eye, bruises, and he stayed. He stayed for Bible study. He's been coming. He's been, you know, we engage with him, and he said to me, you know, I cannot find a community of faith who will accept me. And I was like, well, you know, here you are. Here you are. So it's such a mixed group. And it's not going to be people who grew up with church. We have folks in the Welcome Church who are Muslim. We have several folks who are Jewish. And we have a lot of people who are unchurched. You know, so did you, yeah, go ahead.
So the little church around the corner that partnered with us last year and still supports us, Sozo, they have, their kind of like motto is the Church of the Misfits.
Oh,
And
I've heard of that.
Even on their stage, they had their 10th anniversary last fall and invited us, and we went and they did a whole presentation about our collaboration. And the whole time I kept looking on the stage, and I'm like, they're already decorated for Christmas? That's kind of early, you know, because it was all the characters from the Rudolph story, you know. All them, and so then I saw the sign, and then as he explained it, then it all made sense. But yeah, they're just an open door to anyone.
That's all people want. People want to be heard and seen. You know, I see you, and loved and accepted, and that can get tricky. That can get hard. These books.
Violet, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Do you practice Holy Communion?
Yes.
Excellent. Great. And that
Every
will be
week.
available.
Oh, by the way, I'll tell you about our first communion together. I was just serving tea, really. I met the women in the bathroom at Suburban Station. This is true, and I started seeing that I have a neuromuscular disorder, myasthenia gravis, so I take public transportation. I don't drive. I was studying at the time. I'd go into town for my psychoanalytic studies, take the train back, and I was tired. I was like bone tired. And I know every restroom in Philadelphia. If you ever need to pee, come see me. But this is true. But I would be in Suburban Station, and this is before they were renovated. But the restroom, I would go in and see the women, and they, to this day, this is where they change, where they wash up, where, the thing that always got me was how they would wash their hair and dry with those pathetic germ-spreading dryers that are in there. And so I was still at St. Michael's. I was at St. Michael's in Germantown for 14 years. That's how I know Janet. We co-pastored. And I started something called unshopping. Before I would go out to my classes, I would get a shopping bag and put tissue paper in it and go pick out some clothes and lay them out on the table in Suburban. There was a little table there. It used to be like a little ante room. And I would be a personal shopper. So I fitted, people would come in and, it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're playing store. I loved it. I was having a good time. So I got to meet the women, and then the women were exhausted, and I said, I just need a place to serve tea. And so the women can sit. And I left St. Michael's after 14 years to find a place where I could serve tea. And Holy Communion in town said, oh, you can come here for a certain number of hours a week. Trust me, I had no call. I was on leave from call doing this. No money, no call. My husband's sitting down at the table going, we can go for 4 more months. That's it, 4 more months. Because he's a social worker, so nobody makes money in my family. But anyway, so that grew, and then we said we could have 25 people a week come in, and we started a welcome center. But then they learned I was a pastor, and they said, can we have Bible study? I did not ask to do Bible study. They asked me to do Bible study. So the first Bible study we did was on John 6, the bread of life. And we're sitting there gathered and doing this story on the bread of life. And somebody said to me, well, could we have that bread of life? That was our first communion together. I said, yeah, we had communion together. And I asked for 2 people to help out. And I knew a lot of stories. The first person who volunteered was a woman who had been severely abused as a child. The second person who came up to volunteer had just come out of incarceration for being a perpetrator. So I had these 2 as my first 2 assistants. And I thought, what other table in the world is going to have these 2 people together, right? And so from there, I said, well, they said, can we do this on Sunday? Where's your church? And I said, well, where do you think we should do it? And a couple of the people walked me to the Parkway. And that's where we picked our first spot to do our first service together. I had no 10-year plan, no 5-year plan. I had no plans. I was just doing it. And so there was an Episcopal church in town, and I figured the Episcopalians always have money, right? I don't know. But anyway, I did hear they did have some money. And I went and I said, can you pay 1/3 of my salary for 3 years so I can do this? And I said, I'm not coming here to preach or anything. I just need the money. And the vestry voted to do it. Then the Lutherans heard that the Episcopalians did this. And don't you know, they found the rest of the money for her salary. So now they took me off on leave from call, because I was doing this whole time on leave from call. And they told me I was a mission developer. I didn't know I was, but they told me I was a mission developer. And that's kind of how it evolved. So I share that story to say, be open when you go in, because you don't know the amazing surprises God's going to have for you. It is going to be wonderful. I used to, at the end of the night, I don't do this anymore because I got lazy, but at the end of every night, I would write down, what did I learn from the street today? And I have a long list of that. And I still learning. It's a surprise. So I'm going to read you a definition from our Healing Chocolate Chip Cookies books, and I'll tell you about that. A holding space is a willingness to walk alongside one another, whatever journey they are on. To listen with empathy and without judgment, to clearly and consistently communicate the healing message, you are loved, you are not alone. That's everything in a holding space. Creating space is turning everyday spaces into sacred ground, being intentional in the community you create and the environment you inhabit, recognizing the sacredness in the everyday and in all who gather. So that's why we light the candle. We say, there's something different is happening now. We might be in this little narthex. We might be on, we used to do Bible study on the steps of the church. We're on the steps, but this is sacred now because we're together, centered around God. The 3 things that we keep repeating is show up. If you're going to do this, please, these are people who've been abandoned so many times and who've often gotten leftovers and, student therapists that change all the time. I mean, you have to show up and you have to be consistent. So it is a commitment, and then to treat everyone with respect and dignity, which, I can't imagine would be a problem for this group. I said we only have about 10 minutes, but I want to show you, I want to honor your time. During COVID, we still worked because we were outside. And we did, Rachel, who's our volunteer art person, who I don't know what we would do without her, she decided to take all the things that we did over the past, at that point, at least 10 years, and just put them in a book. So these books have everything that our we have 2 women's groups. One was always cooking together. Another one was doing art projects, and they were called Sanctuary Angels. We had angel stories, all this kind of thing. And resources that we've used. And the result were this whole series of books called Healing Chocolate Chip Cookies. And the reason it's called that is we have tea time once a week. And before COVID, every single week, I baked chocolate chip cookies for tea time. And one week, one of the guys that we hadn't seen for a while came and said, I couldn't wait to get these cookies. And, poor guy has overdosed and is since gone. But Malik said to me, he said, these are healing chocolate chip cookies. I could feel it every time I eat one. And so we call these books Healing Chocolate Chip Cookies. They're not yet available for the public, but they will be at some point, and they will also be online. And the online will be a free resource. And once they are, everything will be at cost. But it has recipes in it. It has our Bible studies in it that we've done. It has games and tips and everything to fit the particular season. So it's a wonderful resource. I do commend it. The other thing we have here is, you already mentioned this, and this book, Good News from the Margins, was I co-authored with another pastor. He is a Peruvian man who is an immigrant who is actually head of mission development in the ELCA. He has just retired, actually, Ruben Duran. And if you run out of ideas for Bible study, you can take any one of these stories. There's like 40 stories in here with questions for reflection. The stories come from all over the country. There's a whole section on immigration, so you're going to see stories from immigrants, but also they're from people in the Homeless Justice Network who are working on the margins all over the United States and also other countries. And it's a very easy format. We realize that, I as a white woman, and I'm married to an African-American man, and Ruben, as a Peruvian man who's married to a very white woman from Iowa. We just love Jean. Anyway, we started talking about our shared experiences and how we see things. So it consists of interviews we did and stories, and then it's got what I see in the story, what he sees in the story, and questions. And so then there's space for what do you see in the story? And you run out of ideas, you just pick up one of those. The other thing is, what time is it? I don't even... 12:56. Okay, let's see what I could do in 4 minutes. This book, oh, by the way, that book is free. We chose not to get paid for writing it so the ELCA could give it away for free. There's a page called ELCA Resources. You can get a free copy of that and also of this. This book, Beauty for Ashes, is a Lenten devotional written by our network based on those principles I told you. And the thing that I'm most excited about in this book is there's 8 pieces of artwork. You see the cover. That is from one of our men on the street. And Jabril, who now has a place, but it was through our art program where we got him supplies and he started doing his art again. He suffers from depression and anxiety. He was on the street for about 5 years. And now he is back to doing his art. His art is really beautiful. This is also free from the ELCA. So I'm giving them a shout out and a plug. We don't have time to do Bible studies, but I want to tell you, I'm going to leave this because there's copies of 4 Bible studies that we did. I'm not saying that that might be the one you want to do, but for example, there's one on the Samaritan woman. And as I said, we started a shelter called The Well. And so that text is important to our community. The women who have been in the shelter call themselves the women of the well. So for us, that was an important text to do. I think I might have included one on healing and one on bread, because John 6 was really important to us. But the other thing I want to say is get creative. Included in here, one day we decided we were going to write a psalm. It's another way of teaching. You can look this up. You can Google it. There's a format to writing a psalm. And so we asked the group, what's a name that you would give for God? And we just started writing. What's something that you're praying for? And we started writing. And it came up with this beautiful psalm of lament that has been used for the past 5 years at Homeless Persons Memorial Day, the day that we remember anybody who's died on the street. So that can be a Bible study. Another thing I included in here, did anyone ever make scripture cake? Yes, scripture cake. Well, I know I've eaten my words a lot of times. I don't know. I put that here. It's a recipe for a cake. Every ingredient is referred to in scripture somewhere. So we read all those lines of scripture, and of course I made the cake and brought it in, and then we all ate the cake. And so, just a fun thing like that. In the healing, I included a couple of things from the Healing Chocolate Chip cookie books that, icebreakers, I guess. I don't know what you would call it. So, for example, one thing is called the gratitude game. We use these at the start of our meetings. So the gratitude game, depending on what color you get, name a person you're thankful for, a place, a food you're thankful for, a thing you're thankful for, or anything of your choice. You can use anything. They sell dye, we use dyes with the different colors. But also, you could use, if anybody still has a Candyland game in your house, those cards have these colors on it. Or you could just make your own color cards. But these are simple things where people can feel comfortable. They're questions that aren't threatening. So in December edition, in November there, we had a lot of Thanksgiving stuff. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff. I'll give you real quick a format, and then I'll read you something. I don't know how you do Bible study here. Usually, each person who's leading it does it differently. When I do it, and these are some of the Bible studies I did, I'll have talking points about the text. Now, I'm nerdy. I taught Greek at the seminary. I'll have Greek, Hebrew. So I'll throw in some of the meanings of the words, and people love it, right? But there's a lot of open-ended questions. And it does, like, when we did our bread Bible study, I looked up several passages about bread. I had several questions related to bread. I'm just trying to see if I could pick out a question. Or for the woman at the well, the first question is, what is it that you thirst for? What is it that you thirst for? So the questions have to be not threatening, just because you're meeting people for the first time. And sometimes they won't be there again for the second Bible study. I mean, you don't know, right? You're not just going to show up. So that's all here. There's examples of that. And our artist friend here, we were asked to go to a church and explain our art program to preschoolers. Well, now adults are using this. We made up a coloring book to explain. It's called Art Street, Artists Without an Address. And it's really simple. And the drawings are simple. It says, sometimes when people don't have a place to live, they feel invisible, like no one sees them or hears them or even cares about them. Sometimes people are mean to those who don't have a place to live simply because they don't have a place to live. And then says, these people might be strangers, so you should follow stranger rules, but you can always be kind and treat any person with respect. So there's coloring pages in this. It talks about the art that we do on the street. It's, again, a real simple thing. And that resource is available. But, yeah. I'm going to, I guess, close by reading one of these, but I hate to not take questions. So if I don't want to go over time, but if you have questions, The reason I gave out my card is you can feel free to call. I am available. I hope you use me as a resource for anything. Any way it can be helpful, because I'm thrilled that you're doing this. And let's see.
Before you read that, can I just
Please.
offer one thing? I know there was a lot of anxiety about what to say and not say, so I'm going to give you permission. You're going to mess up. You're going to say dumb things every now and then. Just keep it moving. Yeah.
This is why every breath I take, I ask for wisdom. But the other day, we were cleaning up the Salvation Army because Major Kim's husband usually does it, but he was in the hospital or something. So we took everybody, she called us, we took everybody over there in our van, and we were walking around picking up trash and raking leaves, and I just said out loud, I cannot wait to go home. And I was like, oh my God. I just couldn't believe, how insensitive or just, anyway, so yeah, it happens.
Just keep it moving. Oh, no. Oh, I was just handing this back to you. I was going to give you permission to mess up.
It's something for this congregation because of all your, yes, because of these beautiful blankets. This will take only a minute. All right. The scripture is Psalm 91, and it's God loves all people no matter what, is the principle that I wrote about. I grew up in a New York tenement apartment, barely big enough for one person, let alone my parents and my 4 sisters and brothers. By law, the landlord had to turn on the heat when the temperature dropped below a certain level. But there were many nights when there was no heat after we all fell asleep. I would curl up under my blanket, still feeling cold, when the radiator stopped hissing. But more than the cold, I remembered the blissful feeling of warmth each night as my father returned from his late shift at the post office, came in to check on us, and covered me with his heavy blue jacket. With that jacket over my blanket, I felt warm, protected, and loved. For me, that jacket was a picture of the love of God for each of us in whatever places we find ourselves, curled up and shivering. God comes, God protects, and God simply loves. And I just thought about that with all your beautiful blankets. So thank you. You're released. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Thank you both for being here. This was very, very helpful. Very quickly, so what we're planning on, Nancy has been working with Pastor to try to put together a bit of a curriculum, if you would, or like a guide that could be followed so that we're not going in there trying to make things up as we go along. As we mentioned, we're going to be going in teams of 2, and we're going to put together like a prayer box. So with 3x5 cards, so that they can, if there's something they want to pray for, put it in the box and it'll be prayed for.
Perfect.
We're going to have little LED, I guess they're called votive candles, but they're LED. We're going to have those for everybody that participates. We're going to be purchasing Bibles that will be kept there to be used. We're looking at the possibility of also getting like a pocket size of the Gospels, maybe Psalms and Proverbs, in a pocket size version that we can give to folks. Of what?
American Bible Association.
Oh, super. Okay. Yeah, I saw one at an Army depot in Pittsburgh last weekend that they had it. So, we're going to have like 3x5 little memo books they can use, and just different things like that they will have available as this whole thing starts up. We're probably not going to start until June is what we're looking at, because partly because Nancy and I are going to be gone for most of the month of May, and so we know it's going to be challenging to get it started and keep it moving, which is obviously very important to do. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. But thank you for being here.
Yes.
If you would like to be a part of this, let me know. I am meeting with the Newtown Presbyterian Church in like 2 weeks. They might be interested in getting involved also. So fingers crossed with that. But thank you very much for being here. Thank you both for coming out. and doing this for us. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. And we do close with prayer and communion every week. I don't know if you're going to do that, but it's just, we close with prayer, at the Bible study. Oh, okay. Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you so much for bringing us together. You are our light. We ask that you shine through us, even in this new ministry, oh God. We ask for your help. We pray that you stand by our side and be by the side of anyone who feels lonely or afraid, anxious, depressed. Oh God, your loving hands are wide and encircle all of us. Bless this congregation. Bless the people who have reached out. Bless the people who are on the street everywhere. And always, oh God, help us to share anything we have. In your holy name we pray. Amen.